All right, joining me right now, everyone, legendary bond investor and portfolio manager of the Janus Global Unconstrained Bond Fund, Mr. Bill Gross. Bill, good to see you. What a day.
Hey, Trish, good to see you. Yes, what a night.
What a night, what a day. First of all, are you surprised?
Well, I think we're all surprised to some extent because we're poll followers, and the polls basically said it was going to be a win for the state camp. But, you know, I'm not surprised after the fact because 53% of the voters last night rejected the status quo. And, you know, the act, I think, is metaphorically similar to the Arab Spring, but hopefully with a longer shelf life. It's an attempt by labor and wage earners to have their agenda heard, whether it's on immigration, globalization, or declining real wages, which you've spoken to with Charlie Gasparino. I think he has some very good points.
Do you think, Bill, that what we're seeing happening right here in American politics is similar in some ways to what's happening overseas? In other words, this uprising, again, if you would, of working class that are saying, look, globalization hasn't helped me.
Oh, I think so, and I think although Trump has many sides to his face, you know, it's fair to say that two of the dominant trends that he's been suggesting as an agenda, you know, have to do with less free trade and have to do with immigration. And you know, and it's a fair question to ask because up until this point, the establishment, and it's not just been Democrats, but many Republicans too, in terms of their orthodoxy, have supported free trade. They believe in Adam Smith and the invisible hand. Well, the invisible hand has been visible for, you know, labor ever since NAFTA, and they're getting a rather raw deal, and we see that not just in the UK, but we see that potentially in the United States, and we see that in other countries in Euroland, and so this is a movement that has been sparked by last night's vote and will probably continue.
When you say it will continue, what do you anticipate are the consequences on global markets? Are we going to see, for example, Bill, additional countries do what the UK did? Well, are additional countries going to pull out of the EU?
Well, they're going to move in that direction. You know, Spain has an election this weekend. France is making noises. You know, other countries in Euroland are basically displeased with the status quo as well. Our elections are in November, and so they'll be preceded by unrest in Euroland. But yes, this is something that's continuing. And what will the effects be? Well, you know, these are populist themes, just to describe them, like them or not like them, but they tend to be deflationary if they're put into effect. They restrict trade, they slow immigration, and they ultimately slow real growth. Now, those are all negatives, but for labor and for wage earners, to the extent that they benefit with higher real wages, you know, for them, it's a good deal.
That's interesting. So you're saying it may not benefit the overall economy in the way of growth, but it benefits the people in the middle and the lower tier? Oh, yes, and I think that's not well observed. You know, Obama's making an interesting speech, and I heard parts of it 10 minutes ago. Mm-hmm. He talked about being interconnected on a global basis as that were the definition of globalization. It's not. You know, globalization basically, you know, allows for freer trade and for migration from border to border, and, you know, ultimately it produces higher profits, it produces higher real growth, but it does produce and has produced for the past 15 years a downward trend in global real wages. And it's that uprising, you know, whether it's the 53% in the UK or elsewhere, that we're beginning to see now. Actually, we saw it with the Arab Spring. That was more political and more violent than what we're seeing now, but it comes from the same roots. You know, these are roots that stress, you know, the grievances of labor and wage earners as opposed to capitalists. So is there a different way? I mean, you're a capitalist and an investor yourself. I mean, as you think about this and you think about your concern for making sure all of America is able to get ahead, does it have you questioning globalization right now and the current policies in place? Well, I think so. I think Trump has a point to some extent in terms of trade policies, that they have to be negotiated more tightly, that the United States has to be a focal point in terms of its own people, as opposed to a global representative for Adam Smith and the invisible hand. You can't go too far. You don't want to go in the other direction. We did that, in the early 1930s during the Depression with the Smoot-Hawley tariff, which, imploded the economy. So it's a decent mix, but I think it's a fair question for people to ask, whether globalization contains 100% positives. I think it doesn't for a certain class of people, and it's that class of people that we're hearing from today and last night.
Yeah, no, absolutely.